off before.
Oh, hello and welcome.
Yes.
We seem to be having some platform issues. I've noticed a couple
Okay.
of times we've asked it to play the intro and it just goes to us and we sit here looking stupid and then the intro plays. So don't know, apologize for that. So anyway, welcome everybody. I'm Jason and once again my partner in crime Hussein as
Yes, Hussein.
we try to stay sane. Uh, so you were saying just before we got started, there's a report that's been debunked.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's like more of a follow-up week this time. Like we are giving some more information regarding what we told in the past episodes, like last time. So we can begin with the report, which was from Gaza last week. We mentioned about the UN report that 14,000 kids might die or will die in 48 hours if there was no aid coming into Gaza and to end the blockade that Israel was causing in that region. So that was something that was attributed to the UN, the Food Aid Program. But finally, what came out is that there was no such report that uh, mentioned about such a 48-hour window period in which 14,000 kids would die or something like that. It was something related to a past report where in in a period of 1 year, 14,000 kids might die. This was a kind of an estimation that was put forward by the UN. So this was used by this Fletcher while giving an interview, and he was making an exaggeration out of that, which was picked up by many news outlets where they started spreading the news. And as you saw, it went like a wildfire. So everywhere, people were mentioning about the genocide and everything. But finally, BBC themselves, they came forward and they asked for uh, the source of such a claim, and that was finally denied, or they just UN was forced to say that that was not the case. So they just made a correction in the news. But as usual, the correction was nowhere, reaching nowhere. But by the time the damage has already been done. But even then, I have a question in this place. That is something like the news was like 14,000 kids would die in 48 hours, and that was proved to be wrong. There was no such a report. So that means what, or that proved what? There was no such a genocide which is happening over there. So is that an example, or that whether that can be taken as an example to say that there's no genocide happening in Gaza? It was all a lie which was built upon the propaganda which was made out by the Gaza, the Hamas from that region, where they were even claiming about the kids getting killed using past pictures from other places, and all such things which they were routinely using and which was caught multiple times. And we have a term called Pallywood itself, where they are making up movies and photo shoots and other things, and thereby using those videos and pictures to incite to ignite the emotional responses among the people and to stand with them. So this was something which was exposed multiple times, and even in this case it was happening. And thankfully BBC was a little more cautious this time. Maybe that's because in the previous incident where they were airing a documentary from the Gaza, where one of the kids who was the child of a Hamas leader was
yeah,
used as a
we talked about this a few weeks
yeah.
ago.
So after that, they had to take down the video, the documentary, and now they are a little more cautious. I would say. Anyway, this was something which developed in last week, and I'm not saying that this is a reason for or a chance for Israel to commit more crime, more war crime, or something like that. They have to be more cautious, even more. That's what I'm saying. And the calls for releasing the hostages and ending the war and ending the sufferings in that region, that should be coming up more and more. And I think there's a slight change in the global arena where people have slowly started up in asking for the release of the hostages in a way that it is happening even in a magnitude which was not seen in the past. So that's a good sign. That's what I would find here, to notify here. Yeah. So you can.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't been paying too much attention to the news lately. I've been really, really deep down the rabbit hole. I've got about 3 or 4 books currently in the works, as you know, as some of the maybe the regular viewers know. So I've got one book that I'm working on with a professor from the University of Chicago. I've got a framework, mostly done on that, um, and I'm working on some of their creative, some creative writing works, not just the deep histories. So I've been
And how's it
really
going?
focused. I spent like a lot, all like this past several hours, like just pulling together research. Um,
Mhm.
and this is where like AI and ChatGPT can save you hours, if not days, because when I'm researching, if I'm doing historical research or if I'm just doing creative research, like if I'm, doing a sci-fi story, I can just ask ChatGPT, like, hey, can you give me a summary of this? So like I'm working on a sci-fi story that's going to
Mhm.
involve it's going to involve like dark energy and higher dimensions. So I'm not a physicist, so I just asked ChatGPT. I went, you know, comb
What are
through
they?
the scholarly literature, on theoretical experiments into detecting dark energy, and
Mhm.
it gave me some working plot points. So I haven't really been paying attention to the news. I've
Have
been
you
in my
been
own
to
little
the
internal
in?
world.
Yeah, have you been to this Indian part where even Carl Sagan was connecting some dots where he was saying like the Vedas and some interpretations of the Hindu scripture can be linked to the origins of the universe, where we say that there's a cyclical occurrence and all. So
Not
have you ever
not the
come
cyclical, but
across that?
no, I do. Yes, I have. It's actually
Hmm.
in my book. The book. I know we're supposed to be talking about the news, but just to give a little
Yeah,
background here. So
it's interesting too.
back back around 2020, late 2019, I think, early
Hmm.
2020. So around the time COVID started, I got started writing a book on it. I wanted to do a history of secularism.
Hmm.
How how did the world become secular? Like 400 years ago, Giordano Bruno was burned at the stake, and today, people like Richard Dawkins and his people like him are global celebrities. So how do we go from killing people to making them international superstars in just 400 years? And so I start in classical antiquity with the thinking of the ancient Greeks, some of the Vedas, the Upanishads, some of the things that they speculate on. So in the book, I actually do talk about that. I talk about one of the Vedas that talks about. It's a very agnostic point. There's a science historian named Dick Teresi and Carl Sagan who both said of all of the religions or philosophies, Hinduism is the only one that came closest to approximating the real age of the universe at like several billion years. So yeah, so I am aware of it, and it is in my history of
Yeah.
secular thought.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So it's intriguing to see a lot of things which we can um, which we can find in this Hindu mythology, or what do you say, the history part, where we can connect a lot of things. For example, the democracy part, even that, even secularism, as you said, and many other things with this Hindu part. And I find it so strange why the world was not able to see that, at least to use that as a root to grow the big trees of secularism and democracy, which the world was waiting for until the 17th century or 18th century, where they had to go through a lot of fighting, bloodshed, and all. So that was something which always fascinates me while being an Indian here.
Yeah, I actually did in 2016. Yeah, so this was mainly going to be a wrap up episode, anyways, like just catching up on stories we've reported last week. So yeah, so we're a little
Yes.
bit off topic, but maybe this is more interesting.
Mm.
Um, um, sorry, I just
Anyway,
completely lost. I just
yeah,
completely I'm trying to. What was the point you just made, so I can remember where I was?
yeah, it was about. Sorry, you were mentioning about the Carl Sagan. We started with that.
Yeah,
The Indian
yeah, but
connection,
oh yes,
secularism.
yes.
Yeah.
So in 2016, I actually gave a talk. I was speaking at a Humanist International, um, the Asian Humanist Conference, and they had invited lots of other white male speakers. People like was David McAfee there? No, David McAfee wasn't there. David McAfee was at the one the previous year. Um, but it was like it was a bunch of older white guys, and the host of the organ or the organizer said, "So we've got all these white guys. The topic is Asian humanism. Can you please do a talk on Asian humanism?" So I did, but I did a twofold thing. So which ties into your point about how these humanist ideas evolved in Asia. With whether it's Confucianism or Taoism, um, within
Buddhism.
within the Hindu schools, Buddhism, looking at some of these traditions that evolved in Asia in the Iron Age, and then in part two of my talk, I flipped it on its head. So there all of these cultures that created all of these humanistic philosophies, and now like they're the most repressive, backwards, you know, anti-humanistic regimes, like places where you can be executed for being, denying God. So it was kind of an interesting dichotomy to juxtapose sort of this birth of humanist ideals in multiple Asian cultures,
Yeah.
contrasting with what's happening now in many of these authoritarian states around Asia. So
Yeah.
it was an interesting talk, I thought. So, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I've looked in, and so the book. So I can't remember if I've mentioned before. So I'm working on a book with Brooks Zaporian. He's a professor at the School of Divinity at the University of Chicago. He's written a book called, and it's a very heavy title, and it's a very heavy read, Experiments in Mystical Atheism, from Taoism, I think, to Tiantai, Spinoza, and beyond. So it's a really, really heavy read, but it basically talks about how looking at Hindu, Buddhist, Taoist tradition is specifically from a transcendent point of view, that when the sages in these traditions had these sort of mystical experiences, there's a common theme to all of them, and that is this universal sense of unity with the cosmos, which seems to
Mm,
be
yes.
common across cultures and across time. Um, so he and I are working together now to take that book, which is it's a very heavy scholarly read, and I
Mm,
know this material, and even for me, it was a slog to get through, like because like it's such high concept material, like you really, really have to focus to understand what Brooke is trying to say. So the people who are familiar with my writing know that I'm pretty adept at taking these really high concepts and distilling them down and
mhm,
making it understandable and comprehensible. So we're working together on that now. And I've written in preparation for that, I've written a series of articles on like the commonality of transcendent experiences, on this nature of this universal cosmic oneness. I've even, as part of the book that we're doing, um, asked ChatGPT scan the psychological literature for studies related to the commonality and the fundamental aspect of this cosmic oneness, both naturally occurring and psychedelically induced. So I've been
mhm,
incrementally building up content as we go through,
mhm,
and using like ChatGPT, say, go out, scan the literature, write me a summary of how like these, what these papers are saying, that we can then include in this book on transcendent experiences, which is intended to be. an antidote to Jordan Peterson and his fully theistic Judeo-Christian, 12 steps for life. But it's going to be very much a secular philosophy to emotional freedom by looking at these elements that are common in Taoism, Tiantai Buddhism, the Vedantic school of Hinduism, looking at the thinking of Spinoza, Nietzsche, and more recently Albert Camus,
Mhm.
and synthesizing this all together into a book that people will actually want to read and will present the information in a way that is readable by
Mhm.
people who don't have any background in philosophy and quantum mechanics and all that stuff, and just
Mhm.
making it an approachable pocket guide for people who, they may be interested in the topic, but don't necessarily have a scholarly
So,
background. So we're just presenting this nice, neat little summary.
so are you gonna, yeah, create more thieves on this atheist platform?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Great. If they are
So
peacefully coexisting, there's no problem with that.
yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
I've been working on that framework for that. So like I've got pretty much got the outline for that book with Brooke done.
Anyway, looking forward
Um,
to that.
yeah, but I'm also,
So,
I've written over the weekend. I wrote like 3 or 4 articles.
mm,
One more again on like this cosmic oneness, using AI as a research tool to
mm,
really ramp yourself up. That it
sure.
would have taken me weeks or months to have read all of these things, compiled my
Mm,
notes, and written a summary. And I just put a prompt in a GPT, said, scan the literature, write me a summary, and then I can
mm,
read that summary and distill it out. So I wrote an
mm,
article on leveraging AI to be not only much more productive, but to also give you tools you need, but also for fact checking, right? Like if you
mm,
are like in this case, it was related to creative story writing.
mm,
That I was using AI to fact check certain elements of sci-fi reality and theoretical physics to make sure that these are plausibly realistic scenarios. So, which is what I was
mm,
doing like just before this as well. So,
Anyway, anyway, we
yeah,
will introduce that book once that is out, so we can
yeah.
discuss on that at that point of time. Even we can even have a look at the table of content, and we can have a small intro to each chapter wise introduction.
Yeah.
So we'll plan that one day. So
Yeah.
best wishes for your
Thanks.
book.
Thanks. So yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
working on multiple. Like I've got at least 3 or 4 projects I'm currently in the middle of different stages. So I'm not really paying attention to the news right now. So the story that I do have this week is I'm pretty sure I mentioned this last week that the US Supreme Court has blocked public funding for a Catholic
Mm,
charter school in the US. Now there was a follow-up article I came across today
mm,
um, about this block. So there, as people know, there are 9 justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, Amy Coney Barrett, who I believe was the most recent justice appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court, if she's not a member of Opus Dei, the ultra conservative Catholic shadowy organization, if she's not a member of Opus Dei, she's definitely an admitted member of another highly ultra conservative Catholic organization. Now, she recused herself, which is why the court was deadlocked 4-4. Now, according to this article, the it has not been disclosed who voted. So it's still a matter of speculation that probably the 4 Catholic justices voted in favor of allowing public funding, which shows you just how political religion really is, and puts, you know, reveals the lie behind the separation of church and state in this MAGA culture of the U.S., where you can have 4 American Supreme Court justices voting to violate the U.S. Constitution by violating this principle of the separation of church and state in favor of funding these Catholic schools. So it's an interesting that it came down to a 4-4 split, and it's even more telling that according to this one article, at least, they have not released which justice voted which way, which I just
oh,
thought was a little
controversial.
bit sketchy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
So,
So the
with all these, do you think that the secular principle in the U.S. is coming down, or is it rotting from within? Mm. Hello, there's a problem with the connection.
yeah, sorry, I just dropped out
Yeah,
there for a sec. You were
yeah.
just starting to ask me a question when I dropped out.
Oh, okay. So I was asking you this one. That is, so do you think that the secular principles, the morale of that country, the U.S., is rotting from within?
Well, the demographics are shifting, right?
Mm,
The I think I mentioned this either last week or in a previous broadcast. The U.S. demographics are shifting. The fastest growing demographic are the nuns, people
mm,
like us. Um, the Pew Research Forum within the last year or two released a study that shows now that American Christians are now no longer in the majority. They've dropped below 50%. And the nuns are like 30% and climbing. So
mm,
yeah, there is theistic rot within the US, religious political
mm,
system, but the demographics are shifting rapidly under their feet.
mm,
These evangelical Christians they're losing ground fast, and they know it, which is why,
mm,
to my mind, this MAGA upsurge is like their last gasp. Like they know they're sinking, and
mm,
this is their last chance. So
mm.
that's my interpretation.
Yeah, but at the same time, there's an upsurge of the Islamist forces where they are trying to um, uh, sneak into these gaps where they can have a control of all these positions, key positions, especially in the power positions.
Oh yeah,
And do you think that is a
that's nothing
threat?
new. No, no,
Mm,
that's yes, it's a threat, but no, that's nothing new. In my first book that I self-published in 2013,
mm-hmm,
I have a an excerpt from, I believe it was a 2010 New York Times article. So some of our viewers might be aware. I don't know that it's going on anymore, but it was certainly for several years over the last decade, repeatedly cropping up in the news. It actually showed up in a Simpsons episode
mm-hmm,
within the last 5 years. This the Texas textbook controversy. Now,
mm,
because Texas is such a huge state that what the publishers were doing was that whatever curriculum the Texas State School Board came up with was being used by something like 46, 47 other state boards of education. They were just copying whatever Texas came up with. Now, the
mm,
Texas State Board of Education got taken over by evangelical Christians. Now, the same thing happened in Kansas back in, I believe, the mid to late 90s, and then again it happened again in the early 2000s. Now, those of you who are familiar with the flying spaghetti monster, the flying spaghetti monster came out of the first Kansas State Board of Education, um, when these evangelicals took over and they removed education from the state curriculum. And then it happened again about 10 years later. Now, this is where the Pastafarian flying spaghetti monster was born, because somebody wrote a letter to the editor about like these ridiculous Kansas notions, and and invented said, well, what about the flying spaghetti monster? And thus it was born. Now Texas is having the same thing. You've got these evangelicals who hijacked the Texas State Board of Education, and this textbook controversy dragged on for years. Like they wanted to remove references to people like Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding
mm,
fathers, and put in references to their Christian cult heroes of American history instead. Um, so this was a really, really big controversy. So there is, I believe I'm getting a flashback. The name was Cynthia Dunbar. So it was a New
mm,
York Times article from around 2010 where Cynthia Dunbar, who apparently was a lawyer from, again, I'm going from memory, Regent Law School, and Regent University was Pat Robertson's university. So not only do you have an evangelical university, it is a freaking law school. And she says, well, like, the generation in the schools today will be the generation that's setting policy, in the next generation. And she said, like, it's very much their stated mission to hijack the curriculums, to dogmatically program these children who will grow up to be politicians, lawyers, judges, senators, Supreme Court justices, presidents. So yeah, it's very much in their Project 2025 playbook, something that they've been admitting for like the last 10 to admitting for like the last 10 to 15 years. So
And did that work? Is it
well,
working?
you've got Trump elected, and they've now reversed Roe v. Wade on the Supreme
Uh-huh.
Court. So to some extent, yes, it is working. But
But at the
again,
same time,
this
now,
this
now,
is
now,
MAGA's
such,
last gasp.
yeah, but now such seeds are now sown by the Islamist forces, and they are now bragging out about that. And I have seen a few videos over that, not just in US, even in the Europe. What they have done is, or what they are talking about is that just wait for 10 years, just wait for 15 years. We are coming out. Our children are in the schools now, so they will be coming out, and things will be under our control. So just wait for 10 or 15 years. This is what the Islamists are saying now. So I think most of those kids who, by the time they come out, with the exposure that they get from the internet and other places, the information, they won't be sticking on to what they were taught to in the schools. And most of them even might be, if they are given Islamist education the way they dreamt of, they won't be staying as the loyal Islamists. Most of them would be even ex-Muslims, or even they can be even moving out of that. So that's also a possibility. So, and this exactly what happened with the evangelical mission of hatching out such kids from the schools. That's what I believe. And of course, as you said, there are a few exceptions like the Trump or any other person. So this can happen, and I think that's not that's a successful model. I don't think so, because this is a, even if you push for that, it's not 100% effective. That's what I believe.
Well, plus we're in the information age. There's just too much information
Yeah,
available
that's a
online for people to
huge
look up
difference.
to challenge these narratives. So yeah,
Yeah.
religion's days are numbered. As I've said repeatedly on this show and elsewhere,
Mm.
the enlightenment reckoning for Islam is coming, and it's coming soon. Whether it occurs in the next generation or two, I don't know, but it's coming, and it's coming fast.
It's
So
happening now. It's not
yeah.
coming. It's happening.
Oh, it's happening. Yeah, but like
Yeah.
for like a full sort of paradigm shift,
Mm.
we're probably still at least a generation away from a major paradigm shift within
Let's see.
Islam and world socio-political events. But I think you
Uh,
need to
I'll
jump.
I'll give
You've
an
got other show.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'll
you
give
can
an
say it.
example. So when we talk about the UK, where the things are in a bad shape and the Islamists are taking over, and it's even said that London is no more London, it's Londonistan. That's how it is being termed now. So though we say it that way, I have a few friends over there whom I have met on the social media, and they are much vocal on this arena. They're criticizing the policies which has paved the way for the UK to transform into such an Islamist, as the Vance once said, that UK will be the first Islamic country with who is a nuclear power, something like that. So just like that, when we talk about the UK in that way, I'm also hopeful, or I'm optimistic in a way, because there are ex-Muslims who are planning to be in the race for the offices, the parliament, and all such venues where they also will represent. So things won't be easy for the Islamists as they think. So there will be an opposition which clearly understands what Islamism is and how that can endanger a population, and which can
Right.
take down a country, the democratic principles, the institutions, the secular institutions. So I think ex-Muslims in that way, they have a bigger role in the future to play in this world, to stop Islamism. And I don't think any other person, even if they understand Islam pretty well, just like ex-Muslims do, can do this in a way that ex-Muslims can do that. Because when they do it, there's a I would say there's a great difference. They cannot just oppose the same way they oppose a non-Muslim who understands Islam and criticize Islam, because the way they will be dealt with will be differently. So that's the difference that I have seen. Anyway, let's be hopeful that UK will be saved in the future by the hands or the support of the ex-Muslims. So they have the biggest role yet to be played. Okay.
Right.
So any more?
Okay. No, but I just found that article, the one I just mentioned, the 2010 New York Times
Okay.
article. Let me just pop this in the chat. Times, if
We
it's
can also
behind a
pin
paywall,
that
but
in the comment section
yeah, okay. But people who are behind the
afterwards. Not now.
paywall,
Yeah. Sure.
they can access, if you have access, or if there are other meetings like
We'll
the
go through
Wayback
that.
Machine. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
but here is the link to the article I mentioned that talks about the evangelicals' attempts to take over the U.S. Education system,
I,
education and political injustice system.
Okay, I think though we make videos and live streams like this, if you get some time, we can just post such articles, and we can write short
Right.
articles or some short posts on that, and we can
Yeah.
publish it on our social media platforms so that people will get an idea or a chance to go through that, even if it's on a behind a paywall.
Fair
Okay.
enough. Cool.
Yep. So shall we?
Alrighty. I think you need to jump. You're late for your next video appearance.
Yes.
So, all right. Well,
2
thank you
videos.
everybody for tuning in.
Yeah.
I hoped you enjoyed the chat. DNA 23 is giving me the thumbs up, so I must have done something right. So anyway, have a great
Yeah.
day, everybody, and we'll see everybody in the coming week or two. Take care. Bye-bye.
The next one. Take care.